Mark Scully is one of my heroes.
Thank you. Thank you. Andy Bauer. All right. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's an honor to be in the Brubeck room, and it really is an honor. I know many of you are active out there, so look forward to some conversation here. So as Patrice mentioned, I had really the pleasure, the honor of taking over People's Action for Clean Energy, being asked to lead PACE about 10 years ago. PACE has been around for over 50 years, led for most of that period by an amazing woman, Judy Friedman. And the team that's running PACE now took it in a little different direction, and that is really working with towns. I mean, if anybody reaches out and wants help on a battery or a heat pump or something, we're happy to help, but that's not our real core mission. Our mission is really working with towns, and that's because most of us are involved in one way or another on our local clean energy task force, sustainability team, Wilton Go Green, and we see again and again and again things happen at the town level. So I love being with groups like this from a town who are looking to do stuff. And I know the folks in my town, we're not energy experts. We don't want to have to start over on every project, so our mission really is about helping towns get stuff done. And we didn't, the nonprofit had been around for a long time before we came along, but the name is perfect for what we're doing. It is People's Action for Clean Energy, and the emphasis on the word action. As Patrice mentioned, I had a career as an actuary. One of our vice presidents, Bernie Pelletier, who many of you know is also a retired actuary. What are a couple of actuaries going to do if you set them loose? They're going to go find some data, build a spreadsheet. So that's really what we've done is, and it came out of just sort of a curiosity that, driving around and looking at, you could put solar there, you could put solar there. Gee, how much solar could we actually, how much of our own power could we generate in town? If we all start transitioning to electric vehicles, how much more electricity are we going to use? What's the impact on our greenhouse gas emissions? All these questions come up that we were just curious about. So we gathered data. We started sort of town by town, gathering any data we could find about energy, and some that really didn't have anything to do with energy but was quite helpful. Great example there is we've gathered over the years now, we've been doing this for 10 years, the grand lists from towns. So these lists of buildings in town and vehicles in town that are really used to levy property taxes, but they're very rich databases for energy. For example, we essentially have a database of every building in Connecticut now. We know when it was built, we know how big it is, we typically know what it heats with, we know some construction features, so you can do some interesting stuff with some basic building science applied to that. So one of the key questions that we've tried to answer is, where are our emissions coming from today? So if I do that, it should advance. Right. So because our task really in promoting clean energy, it's not just using less energy, it's really how do we reduce our impact on the planet? How do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, right? So if you want to do that, it's good to know where you're starting from and what the sources of emissions are. And you can see here, the number maybe doesn't mean a lot, it's in the footnote. Wilton generates 164,000 tons of greenhouse gases a year, or about 8.9 tons per resident. Now that's energy alone, so that doesn't include agriculture, it doesn't include waste. So it's not a full, you may have done a full greenhouse gas inventory, an ICLEI style sort of global protocol. It's not to that standard, but it's a good sort of first estimate of how much greenhouse gases you're emitting from energy alone. 8.9 tons per resident. If you look at the state's clean energy targets, and what does that say about greenhouse gas emissions, we need to get that under 3 tons, right? And we need to do it quickly, right? So where's it coming from? You can see a large part is coming from the generation of electricity, use of natural gas, oil heat, electric heat. So put together your oil and your natural gas heat, you got 31, some of that electricity, electric heat. So we got 34% of your greenhouse gas emissions are coming from heating, another 38% from transportation. and then the rest is coming from electricity. So if we want to reduce these emissions, we know sort of where to look. This chart shows your path from that 164,000 tons today really down to zero, right? And there's 4 steps we can take, 4 levers that we have. The first is building efficiency, the yellow wedge, right? So we can reduce our emissions by becoming more efficient, getting home energy solutions audits, putting the insulation in, sealing, getting better windows, doing retrofits, and then as we build more efficiently, build to a higher performance standard. The red wedge shows how much we can reduce our emissions by over time by electrifying heating and cooling, essentially transitioning to heat pumps. You really kind of can't separate those two, right? Because if you're going to transition from gas or oil to a heat pump, you also need to do the weatherization. You need to do the efficiency measures. The blue wedge is how much we can reduce our emissions by getting off of gasoline, internal combustion engine vehicles, onto electric vehicles, right? What was really interesting to me as we created this chart is that those 3 steps get you about halfway, right? If we electrify our buildings, if we become more efficient, if we electrify our vehicles, all start driving EVs over time, we're still got half of the emissions. Why is that? Because we're getting our power from a dirty grid, right? You can drive an EV, but if the electricity is being produced with natural gas, it's better, but it's still a lot of emissions out there. So that last piece is by not only electrifying heating and cooling, but also getting all of our energy from clean sources. Some of that we can do locally. Rooftop solar, it's behind the meter solar, it's solar canopies in town. You got pieces of land, you got projects that we all see come to our siting council, and we have a voice on those. Some of it is that we won't site in town, but we'll get from our grid, which Connecticut has a goal of a zero carbon grid by 2040. So for Connecticut, clean energy essentially is solar and offshore wind, right? Those are the 2. I mean, there's some smaller pieces out there, but that's really where we're going to get our clean energy from. And fortunately, we have an incredible offshore wind resource. It's still a little bit expensive right now, and it's been a bumpy road in getting that off the ground, but not off the ground, sort of in the water, I guess. But it's an incredible resource. We have a fairly shallow shelf off of the East Coast, right? As you go farther north up to Maine or on the West Coast, it's much deeper very quickly, so we need to do sort of floating wind turbines there. We have the advantage of being able to fasten them right to the floor of the sea, and most of those leases, those federal leases, have been sold. It's going to happen, right? We're going to start building offshore wind, and the prices, like any technology, will get driven down, and we have the potential to for a massive energy resource out there, right there, not far away. What's great is, contrary to what our dear leader might say, the wind blows when the sun doesn't, right? The wind blows at night, the wind blows in the winter, so solar and offshore wind complement themselves really, really well. And the other piece, of course, in clean energy is batteries, as Andy said. It's really that simple, right? It's solar, wind, and batteries, right? And the prices of batteries, like the price of solar, have come down dramatically. So we're really getting to the point where the cleanest form of energy, as Bill McKibben prosaically says, is pointing a plate of glass at the sun, right? So as we make this transition, we will change the sources of energy that we're using. And this is a really complicated graph. Okay, so here we are on the left today, right, 2024. And this is the energy that we're using. So at the top, we've got a bunch of oil for heating. Then we've got some natural gas for heating. This big slice right here is gasoline. Right? So a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of the energy we're using today is in our cars, right? And then below that, the dark brown is coming from the grid, and that's non-renewable fossil fuel sources on the grid, which is mostly natural gas. When it's really cold and there's not enough natural gas, it's oil, and we burned a lot of oil in the last couple of weeks. And then I keep hitting the wrong button. And then the orange is nuclear. And then there's a little bit for Wilton right now. There's a little bit. So these are numbers for Wilton, right? So there's a little bit of solar on the and a little bit of wind and a little bit of grid solar on the bottom. So over time, as we transition away from fossil fuels, the first thing you see here in this graph, we're going to use a lot less energy. Putting emissions aside, an electric vehicle uses energy more efficiently. An internal gas engine car gets about 35% of the useful energy to the wheels. An electric vehicle is more like 85%. So putting emissions aside, an EV is more efficient with energy, right? Same thing with a heat pump. A really efficient natural gas burner maybe gets in the 90s, 90, 95% efficient, so 95% of the energy in that fuel you're turning into useful energy. A heat pump has a coefficient of 2 or 3. That's a 200 or 300% efficiency. So again, putting emissions aside, heat pumps are more efficient. So we're going to use a lot less energy. And I tell you, we've been looking at this chart for years and years and years. At first, I did not believe it. I did not, how can we tell people we're going to cut our energy use in half? But the more and more data we find, the more research we do, it's absolutely the case. And it's because these technologies, again, forget the emissions, they are more efficient. So we're going to use a lot less energy. That's the first thing you see. Second thing you see, the yellow line shows how much of our energy is electricity. So the stuff above is oil, gas, and gasoline. The stuff below the line is the grid. You've got a bunch from the grid, the electric grid, and then renewables. So that yellow line is going up. So we're going to use a lot less energy, but we're going to use a lot more electricity. And that's, everybody knows that, right? We start using heat pumps, start using EVs, we're going to use a lot more electricity. And sort of coming up from the bottom are the clean energy resources that we need to start to deploy, right? At the very bottom, everything under the green dotted line is local. So we think, we've done some literally back of the envelope calculations of how much solar we think you could fit in Wilton. We'd love to work with you and actually do that exercise with people who know the town, know what land is available, know how many, the conditions for rooftop solar, where some canopies might work. But our rough estimate is, you can see how much that dark green is rooftop, and then you've got above that some carports, and then above that some sort of other local solar like rights of way, landfills and things. So that's how much we really guess you might produce locally. The rest comes from the grid, and the grid by 2050 needs to be all wind and solar, right? So that's sort of the path that we're on. We're going to use a lot less energy. We're going to use a lot more electricity. Over time, it's going to be all clean. So we're really just moving electrons around at that point. We're taking solar energy, we're taking wind energy, and we're running these extremely efficient machines. Let me pause. This chart really has a lot going on. Were there any questions on that before I keep going? Diane.
Energy and Technology Committee of the Legislature this week.
We saw you testified, yeah.
So Commissioner Katie Dykes of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection was talking about how efficient they could be in their purchases of commercial solar, and yet there were also people testifying about the concentration of commercial solar in certain geographies in the state being very, very high. So could you comment on that whole question of where the commercial solar is going to be built? And also a major, major question that I have about energy efficiency and how little it is here is energy demand response, and how none of us can figure out how much energy we used a year ago this month when we look at our bill.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how much money it would cost for the utility to actually spend to get us to be able to get charged exactly what we use, and for us to be informed about when we need to curtail use in order to keep the peak lower. Thank you.
Right. Great questions. Yeah, there was a lot at the Energy and Technology Committee about solar, and our experience with DEEP, Department of Energy Environmental Protection, is they love big utility scale solar, right? Which is great. I mean, the cost per watt is of course lower when you're building these massive, solar farms. And that's really sort of indisputable. The challenge, and we heard that in spades at the Energy Technology Committee meeting, and East Windsor is sort of the poster child, right? They're just getting inundated with big solar projects, right? And the tax revenue they get from them really is less than they might get for other uses. So I think, a couple points. One is each town, I think, really needs to look at that question yourself. Where do we think in town it's going to be okay to put solar, where we might welcome it, right? Where are places where we think solar should be off limits, right? I don't know if you've experienced this lately in Wilton. We had a very contentious large solar project come to my hometown of Simsbury a few years ago. We've got another siting council meeting coming up in about a month on another project. These are very contentious discussions that pit environmentalists against environmentalists, right? We all want clean energy, but we also want to preserve our farmlands and our forests. So we need to be a little bit proactive and look at where we are okay with solar, where we're not. I personally feel, a lot of us progressives are often our own worst enemy, right? We want to live in these beautiful bucolic towns, preserve the character of the town, but you look at some of these farms and the farmers might welcome the opportunity to actually deploy some solar there. And I think if we're going to solve our energy needs, we're going to have to get used to looking at some solar projects somewhere. So it's a blend. The other point I really would make is I feel the emphasis, at least based on the work that we've done on the commercial scale solar, is we place too much, I think, weight on the large scale solar projects. Andy mentioned the impact we've already seen on behind the meter solar. Those are small projects primarily on rooftops, right? Sometimes they're ground mounted. We have a lot of space to put a lot more rooftop solar, including commercial projects where you're not limited to how much electricity is on that local meter, right? Let us put solar where there's room, not necessarily where the electric load is. And we should really think of meeting our energy needs from the bottom up. There's a wonderful writer, Lorenzo Christoph. He was a former regulator for the California Energy Board, or Air Resources Board. And he's written these papers about bottom-up grid architecture, that let's meet our needs locally first. A lot of local rooftop solar paired with a battery has a tremendous impact, as Andy, I think, pointed out really well, at stabilizing the peaks. And then we move up to how much can we site in our community, and then we move to the regional grid, but really a bottom-up approach to meeting our energy needs, right? So yes, we're going to need some large-scale solar, but it's kind of like driving a really, really big truck, and when you come into town, it's really hard. So we need the big trucks to get the large amounts onto the grid, but we're also going to need a lot of solar locally with a lot of storage sort of all over the place. Question?
Could I just say, we... Excuse me 1 second.
Do you have data on how many schools are now have solar?
Funny you should ask. If I go, let me just quickly see if I can do this. If I change the display here.
We tried for many years to get solar on the renovations of Westport schools, and it's been deaf ears all the way.
Take a look at, this is the PACE website, pacecleanenergy.org, and if you scroll down, we did a study on solar on connected schools, right? So there's an actually appendix, a list of all the schools that have solar, and there's some guidance to how you can try to get solar on your schools. You can PDF it. I don't have any hard copies here, but you can download it. I don't think we have any, actually. Yeah, great. But schools are a terrific candidate for are for solar. I mean, they're large, typically large flat roofs. That's not the, how do I get that back? There we go. I mean, they're large flat roofs. They're going to be around a long time. It's a great educational opportunity. So schools are, we should have solar on every school, and there should be no cap on that program, because look who benefits from solar on schools, right? Love that question. Any other questions before we continue?
You have the person in charge of, the building structure and the cost efficiency is not necessarily the one paying the utility bills.
Right.
Yet the renters don't really have a lot of recourse in trying to, be more conservative apart from turning the thermostat down. So
Right.
especially looking around Wilton and the growth in the rental market, I can't help but think that's going to have a big impact in what are the options for, individuals making decisions about how they manage their home.
Yep. Yeah, great question. A couple of points. One is multifamily residents, I believe up to 4, are considered residential in the state solar program. So it's a very favorable state program for residential solar. The federal tax credits have gone away, but the state program is still there, and so I know, and that's fairly recent, within the last year or two, that these multifamily up to 4 get the favorable treatment of being residential. The second thing is, I think, if groups of tenants approach their landlords, right, and maybe there's some potential to sway them. And there was a third point I was going to make about multifamily solar. It's challenging, right? There's a misalignment of incentives. We have the same issue with HVAC and heating and cooling equipment. So it can be challenging. I wish I had a sort of better answer. Question over there?
Mark, I've heard that Eversource is concerned about the balcony solar because of concerns that the electricity will go back into the house and somebody might get electrocuted, and they need smart meters. And I've also heard from reading in the listservs that some localities would like to put in solar, but the infrastructure is not hardened to take the solar. So I'm trying to understand, if it's to benefit Eversource, why isn't money being allocated for these things? I happen to know that UI does have smart meters, which would be enable balcony solar, and I understand that people are very upset with their bills, but I'm just trying to understand where they're coming from, and the fact that Eversource actually is doing an amazing job in Massachusetts, right? Is it because of the legislature, which is sometimes the fault?
Yeah, you wouldn't know they're the same company sometimes when you hear of the stuff that they're doing in Massachusetts. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with balcony solar or plug-in solar, but it's the basic concept is you could go to Home Depot or Lowe's, buy a panel, buy 2 panels, go home, and you literally plug them into your socket, and you can place them on your balcony. It's extremely popular in Germany. Several million customers are doing this. And essentially what it does at any moment, it's producing some electricity, and it's offsetting the load in your house, right? It's not that much, and I think the limit in most places is up to maybe 1,000 watts, so 1 kilowatt of solar, maybe 2 panels, I think, 2. So it's not going to meet all your energy needs, but it adds up, right? It adds up, and it can be quite significant in the end. So it's all the rage right now. It's permitted in Utah, and I think Bill McKibben said 28 states are looking at it right now, including Connecticut. So it is in this House bill, plug-in solar. What I've heard from Eversource, and I don't know if it's true, is that because the way they meter, if you're producing electricity and you're putting it onto the grid, you not only don't get credit for it, they charge you for it. And that's because of, that's what I've been told, right? So that's the metering. We really do need the AMIs, the smart meters, right? Where they can communicate, you can get interval information, real-time data on what are rates. So and Eversource, for reasons that I cannot explain, has really dragged their feet on that. As you said, United Illuminating has smart meters. You've had them for a long time. There was a lot in the solar bill that passed last session about time of day rates, or time of use rates. So I think they're coming, but we all need to put pressure that would, build, make the investment. We'll pay for them, right? I mean, everything Eversource does, we end up paying them for, right? They make, it's not like they have to reach into their own pockets, but we do need, I mean, all kinds of things become possible with smart meters, right? We've got real-time information about what you can time the charging of your car based on the peak loads and the real-time pricing from the grid. So all kinds of good things can happen if you have smart meters.
Could you just take a moment and tell everyone what you guys discovered with your Yale grad student?
Thank you, Patrice. So I mentioned one of the slices of what towns can be doing for themselves is solar canopies, right? And as I mentioned, we had a very controversial experience in our town where they came in with a large solar project. We see it again and again. People want solar, but they want to preserve farmlands, preserve forests. So we started to sort of look around, where else can we put solar? And we saw a really cool study overdone in the Hudson River area. And then Rhode Island did a really interesting study of how much you could fit on parking lots. So we had this just great graduate student from Yale School of the Environment, Kieran Rudge, and they did a study. We updated it in 2024, and essentially we got this really cool data, a database of impervious surfaces in Connecticut, essentially parking lots. The data had been created to monitor stormwater runoff and things, but we took that surface data and modeled how much solar could you fit. We looked at parking lots of 100 spaces or more, and we determined you could get over 8 or 9,000 actual sites in Connecticut, and we could produce over a third of our electricity on just parking lots using solar canopies. France has required all parking lots to have solar. Some people think they're ugly. I think they're beautiful. They provide protection. Put them over your police, your emergency equipment, and they ensure that the readiness of that equipment. So they do cost a little more, right? If you put it on a roof, you have the structure. A canopy is a bit more expensive, but so we've been constantly advocating for, promoting solar canopies as a way of creating electricity, but also preserving, our farmland and forests, right? So thank you, Patricia. There's some hard copies of this one, and it's also on our website. So the other question that we wanted to answer with our model is, if we do all this, will it cost us more or will it cost us less? If we transition to clean energy, if we make these investments, what does that look like financially? So the red line is business as usual. So it starts at 91 million. So one of the numbers that the model spits out, and we love telling this to towns because they've never seen this number before. Wilton spends $91 million a year on energy, right? Your municipal officials probably have a good read on how much the town itself is spending. And each of us might know our own bills, right? But add it all up, residents, businesses, the municipality, transportation, heating, cooling, electricity, $91 million a year, or almost $5,000 a person. Keep that going at, I think, 3% inflation, that will get to almost 200 million by 2050, right? Essentially because we'll just keep buying more gasoline, we'll keep buying more gas, buying more oil, we'll burn it, and then we'll buy some more, right? And that's what we're doing right now, right? Where, on the other hand, if we start to transition aggressively to solar, build the solar, deploy the batteries, start building offshore wind, buy electric vehicles, transition to heat pumps, do the weatherization. The green line shows that trajectory, right? And as you'd expect, in the first maybe 20 years, we're going to have to spend some more money. A heat pump costs a little more. We got to get things we don't have right now. And EVs are almost at cost parity if you count the lifetime cost, but they still cost a bit more. So, but over time, like any technology, once you've deployed that solar, your marginal cost of electricity goes to zero. Once you have that offshore wind, there's maintenance costs, but your marginal costs are essentially so, as we all know, with any technology, the costs go down. So we would get onto this downward sloping cost curve. The blue line shows if we actually financed it. So if we borrowed the money to do it, we actually could do it without spending any more money today, and we would end up spending less. And by our estimates, Wilton would save over $1.2 billion by transitioning to clean energy, right? And I think there's a lot of factors that we have not, reflected here. But the path to clean energy is also the path to lower costs. And the longer we put off, the longer we continue to have to, buy fuel and burn it, buy more fuel and burn it. The challenge is that there's a lot of people that want to continue selling us those fuels, right? So what I'd like to quickly show you is our mission is not just sort of a bunch of information. We think it helps if you want to set out on a path to clean energy. It's kind of good to know what that path will look like and that it actually is possible, right? So that was sort of the purpose of what I just presented. What I'd like to do is just show you, I think if I go here, it won't show up yet. No, it does, okay. So this is the PACE website. And our mission for the last few years has really been to get all of that information that I've shared with you here about Wilton online so that you don't need to call us, you don't have to come to a webinar or a meeting like this, you can just go get it. So if you go to our website and go to this part called Make My Town Energy Cleaner, you can go in, you can select your town. Wilton. And a lot of that information that we just talked about, as it comes up, it's a little slow. We've been working with our web developer on why that's so slow sometimes. But essentially, all that information is what you can see. You can get in, you can compare yourself to other towns, and get a glimpse of sort of what it will look like in the future as we make this transition. And I'm going to scroll down while we're waiting for that. Again, the point is not just more information, but let's do stuff. Let's take some action. And love to continue the discussion about either here or informally about what that looks like. What are some examples? But I think, Wilton, you don't need to worry about the left button. You know who your local team is. I mean, if you're from some town and you don't know if you have a clean energy team or a sustainability group, you could click there, and Andy knows a lot of who those people are. We know some. We'll put you in touch. Or if you click there, you'll see how you can sort of start to build your own team, right? You've got Wilton Go Green. You don't need to do that. But again, the point is to drive you to action. And so if you click on this button, it gets you to a tool to start to select some actions to promote clean energy. And as I mentioned before, there are really 4 steps. There's building efficiency, there's electrifying our buildings, electrifying our vehicles, and promoting clean energy. So those are your 4 categories here. For each of those, if you open it up, you'll see a bunch of actions that towns can take. And these all refer back to a handbook that PACE wrote. Also available right from our website. You can download and print the thing. And it's essentially a list of the kind of things that a clean energy group might do, right? Or Wilton Go Green might take on, right? And you can just sort of say, oh, I'm going to select these 2, and then I'll go down and transportation, we're going to do a couple different things, check those. You can download, you can save that plan, and take it back to your team and then really get started. So we have a handbook of actions that we can take. We'd love to work with you. PACE loves working with towns. We'll come to some meetings and help you do things like promote. We've run some campaigns to promote heat pumps. Everything we do, we steal from other towns and we share. I don't think we've ever had an original thought, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel each time. And I can't resist but sharing with you, this version of the dashboard that was of this thing that was coming up really, really slowly, we're actually about 2 weeks away from releasing a new version of it, and that's this one. Now, this one might actually be faster. If I select Wilton here, Wilton, there we go. So you can see, I'll just start to scroll down a little bit here, and I think Patrice suggested when you sort of look around at what other towns are doing, we often want to sort of compare ourselves. So I'm just going to select. You might want to compare yourself to someone like, I'm going to put in Bethel, I'm going to put in Bridgewater. I'm just going to do 3 towns right now, and Danbury. So you can go in and select any towns that you want to kind of compare yourself to. So having done that, this first chart, you can see that number I said before. Wilton spends $91 million on energy, or $4,900 per person. You can see you're a little more than the state average, and a little bit more than the average of those towns I selected, similar towns. And then you can download the whole data. You can see as many towns as you'd like. We also saw that number, 164,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. You can 8.9 tons per person. You can compare yourself to other towns. Where does Wilton get its energy from today? So that slide I showed before with emissions, this is sort of the same thing. One of the things that's interesting here is, so here's where Wilton is getting its energy today. You've got 34% of our energy is gasoline. You've got 29% from gas, natural gas, 23% from oil, and then that not modular nuclear reactor you have in town is producing 8%. You didn't know about that? What this means is the energy that you're getting from the grid, we've gone back to where that energy is coming from. So this is really ultimately what is the source of your energy. So 8% of Wilton's energy is actually coming from nuclear right now, right? And then other 4%. So anyway, I won't go through this whole thing, but this shows you sort of your progress to date. Anybody can go to this website, select your town, view all this stuff. You've got 4,400, you're producing 4,400 megawatt hours of solar a year. You can see the deployment of solar over time, compare yourself to other towns. And the last thing I will mention, and Patrice has produced some larger prints of this, but you'll be able to go to the top here and download report, and that report looks something like this. All right, so we can, again, this new version of the site isn't quite live yet, but as soon as you get there, you can download and print this thing, and you'll be able to sort of look at everything that we just talked about, where you're getting your energy from, all your sort of historical data about solar, heat pumps, EVs, where you are in EVs, what percentage of your electricity you're getting from solar, what percentage of your vehicles are EVs, how to compare to other towns, and then this sort of path forward of phasing out non-renewable, phasing up renewables, and what impact that'll have on emissions. So anyway, these are there. You can see them. Patrice has printed some of these out. The PDF is available, and pretty soon you'll be able to go download that. But that's all just information. What we really want to do is take action. So we'd love to continue this conversation, but thank you for your attention today.